It started like any ordinary flight. Gate C-17 buzzed with chatter as passengers boarded the plane, rolling their carry-ons down the narrow aisle, looking for their seats. There was the usual mix: families with kids, business travelers glued to their phones, couples trying to stuff oversized bags into overhead bins. Nobody really noticed the teenage boy walking on board alone, quietly slipping into his seat near the back, window side. He had earbuds in, hoodie up, and a calm look on his face. Just another young passenger flying like everyone else. His name was Jordan, 17 years old, heading back home after visiting his grandmother in Atlanta. He was polite, kept to himself, and did what any teenager would do: listened to music, scrolled through his phone, occasionally looked out the window. He had flown plenty of times before, always without incident. But this flight would be different. This flight would change everything. Not long after the doors closed and the plane began taxiing, a flight attendant started walking down the aisle, checking seatbelts and bags. Her name tag read, Susan. She looked professional, sharp, maybe a little too sharp. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Jordan. Maybe it was the way he looked. Maybe it was the fact that he was alone. Or maybe it was something else entirely. She paused beside his row. "Headphones off," she said in a tone that was just a little too loud. Jordan blinked and pulled one earbud out. "Sorry?" he asked. I said, "Headphones off. We're about to take off. You need to listen to instructions." Jordan nodded quickly and removed both earbuds. Okay, got it, but that was not enough, not for her. She stood there for a moment too long, staring at him like she was waiting for something else. Passengers around them glanced over, sensing the tension. Jordan shifted in his seat, suddenly unsure. He had done what she asked. Why was she still looking at him like that? "You need to show some respect when crew members are talking to you," she added sharply. Jordan looked confused. "I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I just didn't hear you the first time." Susan scoffed and shook her head. "Of course not." And then, louder this time, she said, "If you keep acting like this, we will have a problem." It was so sudden, so harsh that even the people nearby stiffened. Jordan looked down, clearly uncomfortable. He did not say anything else, just sat still. But Susan was not done. She walked to the front of the cabin, spoke to another flight attendant, and then turned back and glared at Jordan again. The whispering started. People started murmuring, wondering what he had done wrong. A few pulled out their phones just in case. That was when Jordan did something no one expected. He reached into his pocket, not quickly, not nervously, and pulled out his phone. He typed something calmly, then brought the phone to his ear. He said a few quiet words to someone on the other end. His tone was steady, controlled. He did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He just spoke. And then, he waited. 3 minutes later, the pilot came on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to return to the gate due to an unexpected issue. Please remain seated." The plane stopped taxiing. Everyone looked around, confused. Jordan stayed in his seat. Calm, quiet. The same teenager everyone had ignored just minutes ago now sat at the center of a storm that nobody saw coming. Flight attendants moved quickly. There was whispering between crew members. Tension spread, like wildfire. Passengers started asking questions, but no one had answers. One call. That was all it took. Susan came back down the aisle, slower this time. Her eyes were wide. She did not say anything to Jordan. She just walked past him. Whatever. Jordan said on that call whoever he called had power. The engines shut down. The plane rolled back toward the gate. People were staring now. Some with curiosity, some with concern, and some with realization that maybe, just maybe, this was not about headphones at all, and what happened next. Nobody on that flight would ever forget. The air inside the cabin grew thick like everyone was holding their breath at the same time. The hum of the engines had faded. and all that remained was the low buzz of whispers and the occasional ding of someone taking their phone off airplane mode. Nobody knew what was going on, not exactly, but they all knew something had changed. The moment the plane turned back toward the gate, Jordan stayed in his seat, hands resting on his knees. His face was calm, but if you looked closely, you could see the edge of hurt behind his eyes. This was not the first time someone had spoken to him like that, not the first time a stranger had seen him and made assumptions. But this time was different. This time he had called someone who could do something about it. The older man in the seat across the aisle leaned over slightly, pretending to adjust his bag, but really watching Jordan. He looked like a businessman, pressed shirt, silver watch, Bluetooth earpiece still clipped to his collar. He had noticed the way the flight attendant had treated the boy, had seen it happen in real time. And though he had said nothing earlier, he was watching closely now. Up front, Susan was speaking quietly with the lead flight attendant, her face tense. She kept glancing back down the aisle, trying not to look in Jordan's direction but clearly rattled. Her hands moved quickly as she spoke, her voice sharp and defensive. The crew tried to stay calm, but the passengers were restless. A few, phones were recording from laps, others held halfway up like they were stretching. It was not a full-on scene yet, but it was close. The plane rolled slowly to a stop at the gate. No one got up. The seatbelt sign stayed on. The captain did not say another word. For now, there was just silence and waiting. Jordan's phone buzzed once. He read the message and slipped it back into his pocket. A woman sitting one row behind him leaned forward just a bit. She was maybe in her 30s, with braids tied back in a bun and a book half open on her tray table. She had seen it all too. From the moment Susan's tone changed to when the call was made. "Hey," she said softly, just enough for Jordan to hear. "You okay?" Jordan nodded without looking up. "Yeah, I'm fine." She paused, watching him a second longer, then sat back. She knew that answer. The one kids gave when they were trying not to make trouble, when they were used to staying quiet even when they had every right not to. In the cockpit, the captain finally opened the door and stepped out. That almost never happened. He walked into the cabin, said a few words to the crew, then turned and looked toward the back. Straight at Jordan. He did not say anything yet. Just looked. Then turned to Susan and asked her something quietly. Her shoulders tensed. She nodded quickly, then shook her head. The captain's expression was unreadable. Another buzz from Jordan's phone. This time, he stood up. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. He just unbuckled his seatbelt, stood in the aisle, and looked at the captain. "I need to speak with the gate agent," Jordan said clearly, not raising his voice. "Now, please." The captain blinked, surprised by how calm he sounded. He looked to the lead flight attendant, who said nothing. Then, without a word, the captain turned toward the front of the plane and made a call on the in-cabin phone. The door opened. A ground staff member came on board, and not long after that, 2 more people walked in behind him. They were not wearing uniforms like the flight crew. One was a tall man in a navy suit. The other was a woman with a tablet in her hand and a badge, clipped to her shirt. They were not here to serve drinks. The woman nodded to Jordan. "Mr. Carter?" Jordan nodded back. "Yes?" The man in the suit looked around. "We're going to ask a few passengers to disembark temporarily while we address a situation on board. Please remain seated until your row is called." That was all he said, but the mood in the plane shifted fast. People started whispering louder now. Someone asked if the flight was being canceled. Others looked around, wondering what kind of trouble had really started. The woman with the badge walked down the aisle and quietly spoke to Jordan. "Would you mind stepping off the plane with us?" Jordan nodded and followed her to the front. Susan's eyes locked on him as he passed her. But now she looked less confident. Her face had gone pale. The man in the suit stopped beside her, said something quietly. She nodded fast, almost, like she was trying to defend herself. Then her eyes dropped. Jordan stepped onto the jet bridge and the door closed behind him. Inside, the cabin was buzzing. No one had answers, but everyone had questions. Who was that kid? What kind of call did he make that grounded a flight? Why? Did the airline send people in suits to talk to him? And most of all, what exactly did the flight attendant say or do that changed everything? The businessman across the aisle from Jordan leaned back in his seat and folded his arms. He looked toward the window, but his mind was racing. He had a feeling this would not stay quiet for long. Stories like this did not just vanish anymore. They spread. And with phones recording and eyes watching, the truth had a way of finding light. The woman with the book behind Jordan whispered to herself, "Good for him." Then she pulled out her phone and started typing. Back at the front of the plane, the captain picked up the cabin phone again. "We appreciate your patience," he said over the intercom. "We are currently experiencing a delay and will update you shortly. Please remain in your seats." But the damage was done. Everyone knew something had happened. And though the story was still unfolding, the energy had shifted. This was no longer just a flight. It was a moment, a spark, and it was far from over.